Welcome to the third edition of the European Rotors Podcast, produced by RotorHub International and presented by me, Gideon Ewers, editor with RotorHub International. My guest for this edition is David Smith, President CEO with Robinson Helicopter Company. David's unusual for a CEO in this day and age because he's not an accountant. He's an engineer, and an engineer that graduated from MIT to boot, so, kind of clever. More importantly, though, he is also a graduate of the University of Texas, where he did his MBA, which, of course, makes him a Longhorn Hook'em. David's career, stellar, really. He started with Bell, highlights involved in the inception of the 525 program, was project manager on the 505, and then a spell TRU simulation, returning to Bell to take up the reins at Wichita before moving to the West Coast and Robinson Helicopter, where he took the reins about 18 months ago. David, thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I know it's a busy show for you guys.
Yeah, great
I guess
show.
There's a lot of activity.
Great show, but obviously these are great opportunities to connect. Looking forward to the discussion today.
Sure. There's an awful lot going on in the industry at the moment. I mean, we've had discussions offline and talked about the developments and what you might think, or I think, and you might agree, are maybe some cul-de-sacs that really don't need to be explored at this point with the state of technology. Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge of our industry is we're small. We have only a certain number of collective resources, and the advanced propulsion technology or in areas where we would improve safety dramatically with advanced flight controls, things like that. And so it's important that we as an industry kind of pick the areas of highest impact, the fastest way to achieve our combined long-term goals. So and probably the most critical resource these days is regulatory bandwidth and how much we can depend on the authorities that are all strained and have many projects and many obligations. And if we ask too much of them or too many different things of them, I think it makes the entire industry less effective. So I look to industry groups, and I certainly love the discussion to be a voice to try to get us to all align on where we want our regulators to focus their efforts for the best collective interest. Yeah, I mean, it certainly does seem to be the case with the authorities where they are constrained with resources and budgeting and things like that. A friend of mine actually took up a retirement position at the FAA, and he was disturbed by the number of people who have acting in their job title. was a worry to him. But I think, that sort of area, finding that cohesive, maybe longer term view.
Absolutely. Try to lay it out in an industry side view instead of everyone has their own little business view. And I think that can be effective in areas where there's a lot of proven and well-trod territory, and we're competing on products that are in the same pedigree or technology level. But if we're asking for rulemaking, or if we're asking for unique operational restrictions or operational requirements, the things start to become much more challenged, and you're utilizing a very limited set of resources within the regulators. We went through a certification effort on the R66, 44, and 22 for the new stabilizer, which is a relatively conventional change. It was an aerodynamic change to the aircraft. That took 3 years solid of work with the regulators for the FAA, and we're at our fourth year, going on almost our fifth year, to get it through EASA. Now, not all of that is on EASA. We start the process later for them, but when you think about the time it takes to get that entire certification project done, and this is for safety-enhancing technology, it doesn't meet expectation. And I'm just going to say, I don't want to be misunderstood that this is not a problem of the regulator. This is a problem of our industry, and many regulated industries have the same challenge of we need to provide more resources to the regulators so they can be more effective at reaching all the various priorities that we put in front of them. We put a lot on those folks, and I think that we've not done a great job incentivizing those organizations or helping make it a desirable role. I used the example in another discussion that I think the regulations in finance have this, and medical pharmaceuticals, things like that, all have this challenge of there's not enough regulators, and they're often outgunned by the highest paid people are in the industry side. So you have challenges there. So my suggestion is that we look at opportunities where there's rotations of industry folks into the regulators on a deliberate programmed path, So they say go for a year, and they're seconded to the regulators.
To the regulator
and,
for a
and
time,
then we all volunteer our people, and we over time we want to put our best people there, because it's going to make my best people even smarter and have better relationships with the regulators going forward. Builds trust, builds proficiency, all the things we don't have, right? So I think these are all really effective ways that I got to see it in my early career with the U.S. Army. They had officers that were part of a rotation program embedded with industry, made them better acquisition officials later in their career. And so it was part of how you solve the big problems in defense acquisition. So I think you can use those kinds of playbooks and maybe conquer some of both the standoffishness that's natural perhaps, but you can improve it and make people at least come from the same point of reference. I know my people would be smarter if they lived the life of a regulator for a period of time.
And advancing that idea among your industry or competitors or colleagues, how are they reacting to that concept? Is that something they're embracing, or they're
so it's an example where I don't. I mean, I'll be candid that in my mind, I think our industry groups are in a tough spot too. So we have several industry groups that focus very heavily on general aviation, some that focus on vertical lift aviation, sometimes just over on one side or the other of the pond. And I think the challenge I have is we need to find a better way to get together on these types of topics that are existential risks for all of us. So, and I think there's several that all stand out to me. One is the demographics that are working against us in piloting and in maintaining aircraft. Mm-hmm. I think there's a challenge to us on the regulatory limitations and resourcing that we have. That's the one we were just talking about. And then I think the bigger picture of supply chain dependencies, that we all are tackling our own little wars on that. Robinson less than most because we make as much as we do, but I think there are common needs of how to best service the entire industry for maximum effect. So, and I'm thinking there are creative solutions that will present themselves if we get the right people in the room, mm-hmm. talk candidly, understand we have common interests. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that wider. You just touched on a couple of the points there, talking about sourcing young engineers, sourcing young mechanics, sourcing young pilots. I mean, they're sort of headline issues, but there doesn't seem to be much, motivation to affect change. For example, I think of actually a young pilot who was by the stand here yesterday, who sitting there, he's got 800 hours, commercial license, and he can't get a helicopter job in the arena here because jobs are thin on the ground. Just across the channel, and it's a European political question, he'd get a job next week with Bristow. I mean, they'd be all over him. But those limitations and those obstacles that in visas or licensing seem to be being set in the path, and maybe
And think about if we aligned all the voices, including operator voices and manufacturer voices. We all care about that problem, but today we're all shaking our fist at the clouds, and it's not an effective way to solve the problem. Yeah. Instead, we can get together and actually potentially, we're willing as an OEM, we think very long about these things. These are things we would put money into. We would be willing to invest in some effort that helps develop more pilots or has a better stickiness to keep people that are developed as A&Ps or licensed engineers here in the European Union, and then turn into helicopter specialists, because I think part of the problem is if we leave it to the market, the airlines tend to dominate, and I think that's when I saw that. You can see it anywhere in the world you go, you see that same problem. But China was like, the schools were producing every single body that could be capable was getting pulled into the airlines when I worked there, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity for us to have a combined approach.
Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks to elements where you have major airlines in the U.S. actually going to keep calling it the wrong name, Fort Novacell, and actively recruiting rotary wing pilots, which is something that just would have never have happened in the past, and yet they're pulling those guys, pulling those mechanics, and bypassing. They would have been a source for the rotary industry, and they're not anymore.
Yes, that's right. We're losing a whole generation of those folks if we're not careful. That's certainly the impact as well of these temporary surges in demand that drive airlines to quickly gobble up people. It disrupts our training. It disrupts our businesses in a way that is much bigger than just an individual job loss. It's this continuity of we invest years in a person, and we do this in our factory as well. 5-8 years of time building a really great craftsman that can do aircraft assembly or sheet metal work, and they get pulled to the airlines, and that disrupts our whole succession plan and how we're developing the organization. So really impactful. You know?
It really has that longer range thing rather than immediate loss. There's the time to rebuild that knowledge base, the time to find the next person.
Absolutely.
All of that going into the equation as well. And I guess that you've talked about getting industry-wide activity to make that happen. Yeah. Do you see that as more a function of the individual OEMs or airlines or operators working, or their respective associations like the VAI or...
So that's my hope. My hope is that the associations will find a way to make that the priority. As you've heard me speak in sort of other forums, I have some challenges that in recent memory all the industry groups have both changed names and changed focus, and it's not without the investment of these entities and paying for membership and increasing engagement. That puts them in a position where they feel like they have to represent and advocate for rulemaking on new concepts and new aircraft designs, understand how that works. But I think the entire industry needs mechanics, and even these new technology aircraft are going to need mechanics. And if we're not careful, there won't be anyone there to actually put electric charge in them. So these are examples where I think there's alignment across all the organizations, but I wish that the industry groups had a little bit more bandwidth for these types of problems as their priority, because they're uniquely positioned to do so. I mean, otherwise you need to create another organization that's in between.
And just another alphabet soup of organizations to try and achieve that same position.
I mean, I think if you did it, and I did an inventory of all the people who, if you draw the little Venn diagrams of what we make helicopters in GA in the U.S., you pick all the ones that I have trade representation, I've got all sorts of manufacturer groups we can be a part of. There's none of them currently that have the level of commitment to that I would like, and I think we want to be a part of that solution. So I think that's somewhat of a commercial for this podcast, that we want to align messages, but it's back to they're distracted by other things. I think.
I think there's that there's so many shiny new things that people, we've talked about this, are distracted by, and resources that may have been better employed developing immediate solutions have gone off on a tangent that may or may not yield fruit, and not in a particularly short timeline either.
There's been some great progressive regulators that have been recruited away from the regulators to some of these startups, and you think about it and you're like, gosh, what a tragedy that is, that you had leaders that were aware and savvy on how the regulatory process works, but now they're embedded in one OEM advocating for one solution. What if that's not the best solution for the industry? Then where are we going to all end up? So missed opportunities, I think.
I think that's it's one of those things where the almighty dollar can control things for an outcome.
I'm all for free markets, but I think in some cases discussions about what are the real existential risks and how we can align priorities better and talk about them more often, more transparently.
And I guess that circles back to the idea you were advancing earlier with industry investing by secondment into the regulators and driving that process too.
We'd certainly sign up for that. I think there's a lot of folks on my team that would enjoy that, certainly as a trial and understanding how the regulatory process really works. Until you're in it, you don't know about it.
Totally. Sure. I'm going to go a little off piste, and I understand that there's some interesting developments coming out of Torrance in the first part of next year.
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, I'd love to get the scoop, but there are people on high that would crush me if I tried.
Yeah, maybe even ones within arm's reach.
Maybe ones within arm's reach too. But as much as we can. I mean, this is a pretty exciting time for Robinson.
Oh yeah. I mean, what I think, in our team, we've staffed a lot of new engineers from all over the industry, and not just aviation, but electric vehicles and defense contractors and medical devices, all kinds of fields. And we've been able to pool those folks together to do several creative pursuits. One will be focused on new products, and you'll hear more about that for sure in the new year as time progresses. And I think that is going to be an important part of our future for sure. But new products take time, and like we talked about regulatory, it's very hard to predict how long the regulatory piece will take, because there are a lot of new products being pursued right now, I think this one will have immediate impact for safety, immediate impact for the customers that are asking for a solution to make a bigger impact on things like disaster relief. We've had a really strong demonstration of our products recently with the Hurricane Helene relief effort, but I think there needs to be more accessible, more capable aircraft available in the market, and we're going to do that. So I can tell you that's a simple way of talking about the new product side. But then on the other side, we've had some really great and creative folks come in that have looked at our product from an industrial design perspective and really have given us really incredible feedback and opportunity to improve our products in a way that we think is just transformational for Robinson. So, and I think it's true to Robinson's fundamentals of vertical integration and accessibility. So it's not stuff that breaks the bank or it drives things in a different direction than we currently do from a manufacturing perspective. But there's a lot we can do with what we already do, and so I think you'll see a lot of that, and we're excited to show those kinds of things in the new year, and pay attention to the types of innovations you see. I think it's going to be an exciting thing. A big part that we hope to have all the approvals in place for a couple other announcements too, but we really have a strong commitment to safety. We want to be an industry leader in what it takes to deliver a light helicopter these days. So you'll see some things that are industry leading in that and set the benchmark for others. And we've done that recently we have the lightest and lowest cost bird strike windows. We have the lightest and lowest cost cockpit camera, lightest and lowest cost autopilots. And I think you'll see some of that, another step forward.
Excellent. Well, it's exciting to think about and look forward to Dallas and beyond and all of that, all of those developments and news. David, it's been a pleasure as always to talk to you. Thanks for giving us the time out of your busy schedule here in Amsterdam. David, thanks once again.
Thank you, Gideon.
And that is the final episode of the European Rotors Podcast for 2024, and they've been brought to you by the team at RotorHub International. I've been Gideon Ewers, trying to present the show, and hats off to my colleague Megan Davis, who has been editing and twiddling the knobs and making them sound pretty good. We'll be back again sometime in the future. Keep your eyes on the RotorHub International website and follow along for all the latest in industry news.